Welcome to the Luscious Living Podcast. I'm your host, Celine Bilgin, and I am thrilled to have Tommy Baker on the show today. Tommy is an author of 3 books, actually one that's coming out. We're just going to chat about it. He's a speaker, a coach, and the host of the Resist Average Academy, which is a top-rated podcast. After you listen to this episode, I want you to listen to his podcast because it has changed my life. And I just want to share quickly that I started listening to Tommy's podcast when I was in a very low point in my life. I had no direction, no idea where I was going, who I want to be, and mindset was weak. The procrastination was strong, and I really would tune in, and I was in my own world. And really, the Resist Average podcast is something that really lights a fire under your butt in the best way possible. So I asked Tommy to be here with me today. Tommy, welcome. And it is such an honor to have you here.
100% super excited. And Celine, thank you for that message. I know you said it changed your life, and I take that wholeheartedly and I receive it. And then I'll tennis racket the ball right back to you and say, you also changed your life. And that's the beautiful co-creation with some of this content that we consume, and having mentors and books near and afar, is that they find us at the right time, at the right inflection point, and then we embody the principles by doing it out in the world. So I just want to say, congrats on taking the raw material and then putting it into practice in your life, because some people aren't ready for that practice, and it takes a lot of courage.
I appreciate that. It does take courage. It really does. And I want to talk to you about that, because you've had the journey from, fitness to finance. Whether it was insurance, were you selling insurance at one point, and to what you do now? Like, talk to us about that courage. Where did you start? Were you always the way that you are now? And how did you end up to what you're doing now?
No, it's great, because I got asked this on a show recently, and the host, he was like, where do you get the energy, Tommy? Because I see you on the feed and you're always going, and you do more in a day than I do in a week. And I said, thank you for that compliment, but it only came from not having that. It only came from contrast. And so my journey started when I was, just like you mentioned with yours, I was in a career that I wanted nothing to do with it. I felt pressure from my parents and family and society. I had no clarity on what I wanted to do, and I felt stuck, and I didn't have a powerful relationship with myself. And that's the reason, to be in that state and then be able to create a completely different state. It's not even about fear of getting back there. It's not about that. It's about honoring that transformation, and who you became through that process. And so that's where I get that's how I'm where I'm at today, because I remember what it was like to be stuck in that career. I remember what it was like to actually not wake up in the morning. One of my definitions of success is waking up in the morning excited for what the day has to bring, both good, both challenges and opportunities. So the contrast is really where all of that passion and the courage to actually change something came from.
Yeah. So you had that point of really being where you are and seeing the gap between where you were and where you want it to be. And it became uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yes, very.
And so what did you do? Because a lot of people are uncomfortable, but sometimes it's more comfortable being uncomfortable than moving ahead. Yeah. So what were some of the steps that you took to say, I don't want to be here anymore, but I don't know what I want?
100%. And so it's, I love that you mentioned about the comfort and discomfort, because I just call this the adaptation effect. And so as humans, we're incredible at adapting, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We see this with fitness, right? One day we could do 10 pounds, and then 6 months later we can do 30. So what changed there? Well, we adapted to a new normal. However, we can adapt to something that we don't want as well. Maybe we're at a career that we joined initially, and we said, I'm going to be here for 90 days. I'm going to do my best, be here for 90 days. I know it's not for me. It's not really right for me. It's not the right fit. But after 6 months, you adapt. Now you have a social circle. Now you're connected. Now, you're getting requests on LinkedIn and it has your little title, and you start to get, adaptation starts to work for you in the opposite way. And so for me, it started with, yes, knowing what I didn't want, but then starting with the smallest possible step after that, because otherwise the gap becomes overwhelming. And the weird thing about success and momentum and growth is that the big steps and the medium steps and even the small steps, they're all quite similar in terms of what they do to you. They all feed the number one human motivator, which is progress. Mm-hmm. And so if we feel like we're making, and sometimes it's perceived progress, sometimes we're just doing the smallest possible thing. But if we do that, we tend to have more enthusiasm. We tend to be more motivated. And then that's when we start to compound some of those wins. And so what looks like a big transformation to somebody else's eyes actually started with a string of very small steps.
Exactly what the 1% rule is. Really
Yes. Yes. And that's why I wrote it, because I had, been in a place where once I realized what I didn't want, now I was like, okay, what do I want? And that's a vulnerable moment too. That takes courage. Mm-hmm. Like, to even declare what you want to yourself requires courage. And then to declare that to somebody else requires courage. And then to declare that publicly requires a whole nother set of courage. But what I found, my pattern was big dream, focus on the gap, get overwhelmed, not make the progress that I wanted.
So, and one thing I've been thinking about lately too is almost when we start to expand. So you start to say, okay, I'm doing these 1% better habits, whether it's just drinking more water, whether it's going for that walk or run or whatever it looks like for everyone. What did you do did you ever feel uncomfortable around people, like the people that were your friends and family, that you start to grow, and then you might think, well, are they going to be upset with me, or am I going to lose friends? Am I standing out too much? Did you ever deal with that? And how?
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great question. And it's a huge part of the process. And I'll tell you, Celine, I found out what I wanted was to go in your world, health, fitness, nutrition, training, et cetera, as my first kind of entrepreneurial thing. And I won the lottery with my parents, like full out won the lottery, 100%. My new book is dedicated to them. However, they had their own model of what success looked like. Yeah. And so when I told them that I was going to leave Wall Street, or the path that I was on towards Wall Street, and pursue fitness, they sat me down and they said, hold on a second, you got a 4-year degree and we've invested all of this time to you, and you're going to become a personal trainer. And they said it with like that level of like, this is not, no. Yeah. And I share that because it's a more extreme example. However, fast forward 3 years from that conversation, or 2.5 years, my dad, who never gets emotional, by the way, had opened up a new facility, 7,000 square foot facility for my second location. And he was there helping me move in these huge mats, and just tears down his eyes saying how proud he was of me. So that's a way of saying the right people will always come around.
Yes.
Right. And I've had also friends from college or even high school kind of make fun of my journey, or what I'm reading, or what I'm posting on social, or you're into this personal development stuff. And guess what? Years later, they became my clients, or they bought my book. Yeah. And so it's an incredible thing. So I always say the right people will come around at some point, because if they want the best for you and they see you that you're living a passionate, meaningful life, and we all want that, by the way, they're going to come around.
They really are. And then the people, when we rise, the people will rise with us, or just, going on with their way. And have you dealt with at all people who are critical, who are close to you, that, as you expand and maybe they're not as happy about it at all? Because I do see a lot of women, especially who are leveling up, but then they're afraid of like, oh, well, what if this person doesn't like that? Or how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, my biggest thing is, and I've dealt with all of that, because to see somebody growing in any way, it sends out, it's a feedback mechanism. We're constantly looking and aware of what people are doing. And so when we see that, it starts to become a reflection on us. So if we see somebody joining your program and starting to look good and skip happy hour, then we start to think, oh, like, what is that? I'm not doing that. How do I feel? How do I actually look? All of that stuff. And so, but what I always remind people is, here's the deal. We're going to be judged no matter what. Yeah. So judgment is part of the human condition. It happens every single day. And so we're going to be judged if we play small, if we hide, if we avoid, if we, minimize who we are. And we're also going to be judged if we play at this level, if we go all out and really own the most authentic part of who we are. So my question is, which one are we going to pick? Right? Because I'd much rather be judged for this one, because the other one means we end up judging ourselves. And that's where resentment and kind of self-loathing and negative self-talk and all of these things, which are so important to our emotional health and thriving. That's the worst judgment of all. Like when we look in the mirror and we start to judge ourselves, that's a tough place to be.
It really is, because you're the one that knows on the inside. You're the one who goes to bed at night, like with yourself. And so what's going on in your own mind. And was it Socrates that said, to avoid criticism, say nothing, be nothing, do nothing.
100%. By the way, I love that you have you just quoted Socrates and you have Marcus Aurelius in your signature as well.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Big thinking. It's funny, the other day my boyfriend's like, you're always either reading or you're pondering.
That's amazing. That's an amazing life. That's an examined life. I love that.
Exactly. It really is. And so speaking of examined life, how can someone know they're listening to this, and whether they're doing well or not really where they want to be, how do they know if their thinking is limited or small, right? Because again, we get very comfortable in our environment, and you are someone who keeps pushing the envelope. You've owned gyms, right? You are coaching high-level entrepreneurs. You have your third book coming out. How do you know for yourself, and how would you teach someone else, hey, actually there is another level? Because it only comes down to our thinking that our lifestyle is created. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, no. And I got a simple exercise, which is, I would have somebody write down, if somebody's listening, I would have them write down some desire, goal, thing that they want to experience in their life, in their business, with their weight, relationship, whatever it may be, something that like means something that like is exciting to them. You would write that down and then sit with that for a second and see what starts to come up as you think about the path to get there. Because often what happens is the limited thinking, or just the thinking in general, starts to come up. And so, write something down. I'm sure you went through this. When I launched my podcast, I wanted to launch, it was 5-6 years ago. I want to launch a podcast and talk to some of the world's best CEOs, visionaries, spiritual teachers, mentors, et cetera, et cetera. So write that down. Now, in that moment, I could say, but Tom, you don't know how to do that. You've actually never professionally interviewed anybody. You don't know what the equipment was. There's already tons of podcasts. Even 5 years ago, there was already tons of podcasts. So if those things start to come out, you just deconstruct them one by one, and then you can turn them, you can flip them instantly. So, let's say in my example, there's already tons of podcasts doing what you're doing. Great. How can I make mine different? I don't know anything about interviewing. Great. What's one thing I can do today, listening to an interview, and take one note of something they did that was special? And so that's one of the easiest ways to start to not only see where your thinking is, but start to just instantly knock them down and take limited thinking into really powerful thinking.
It's so true, Tommy. I love that you say that and give this very tangible exercise. And I'm going to do it even in my own life, as I always do, but even after this, because it's everything is a thought away. Like the next level is a thought away. Because if it's not examined, then we just keep thinking, well, it's all the same. It's all the same. It's already been done before. And who am I? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The examination means it loses its power, right? It's like, because I coach a lot of people, and if those thoughts go unexamined, then they're just permeating in the subconscious, and then they're going to dictate our decisions, our behaviors, our choices, and our actions. So if my thought is losing weight is difficult, I've never been an athlete, I've never been able to do it, then of course it doesn't matter which diet we end up going on, because or which program or whatever, because if that's driving the subconscious, then that's going to dictate our decisions at some point. So it might last a week, it might last a month, it might even last a few months, but ultimately we'll revert back to that baseline thought.
Exactly. And that's why I work with women on this vision that they're creating and the mindset part of it, because you could literally, like, people know what to do next, I believe, but it's the internal stuff that needs to be in order. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I don't mean to cut you off, but I have this thing called the 88-12 rule, and it's based on 10 years of coaching. And basically it says any result that we want, whether it's weight loss, whether it's to write a book, whether it's a career promotion, is 88% emotional and 12% tactical. So, and 12% actions, tactics, strategies, tools, all of this stuff. But 88%, like the deep foundation, is that we can call it mindset, we can call it emotional. I say emotional because a lot of times these emotions come up when we're looking to and directly impacted by our mindset. But that's the truth, right? Because like you said, I was at Barnes & Noble the other day. I've been in health for going on 15 years, and I stood at the diet section and I left because it was overwhelming, because there were so many options. Keto this, don't do keto. Paleo this, don't do, like, and I'm someone who knows the industry. And so it's not about more information. We know what to do. It's about the deeper mindset, emotional work.
It's so true. And this is really what you help people with. And so, yeah. I mean, on a fundamental level, right? And so you work with a lot of high-level business owners, and you see patterns in common that a lot of people have that come to you with?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's the cool thing about working with people is that when you take a step back, you notice the similar patterns emerge, right? And that it's not specific to some industry. It's not specific to some specific niche. It's just part of the human condition.
It's so true. And I'd love to know, Tommy, how do you deal with, and how do you advise people to deal with, when not just setbacks, but like when life gives you double whammies, or even the height of the pandemic and the climate, even currently as of recording this, or just disappointment? What's going on in your brain at that moment?
This is actually the most important marker of growth. Like what we're talking about here is like, this is the number one thing. I call it the comeback rate. And the comeback rate is, I get a passive aggressive email from a boss. Let's say that, for example. And it really puts me in a low emotional state. I'm frustrated. I'm anxious. I'm angry, maybe. Now, today, if that email gets me out of my clarity, out of my momentum, out of my progress, let's say it takes, for some people, let's say for me, it takes a week to get over. And that can happen, right? Like one email could mess us up for a week if it's bad enough. When I'm working on myself, when I'm growing, when I'm expanding, when I'm using these tools, listening to these podcasts and books, the idea is that something that took us off course for a week 3 months ago, today, maybe it's only 3 days. And then 3 months from then, maybe it's only 4 hours. And then you can see where this is going. And ultimately we get to a place where the comeback rate is 15 minutes. So yes, you're going to feel the frustration. Yes, your mind's going to start spinning with stuff, but you've built such a foundation of what I call emotional resilience that you can get right back up after a rejection. You can get right back up after you try to launch something that didn't work. You can get right back up after you started the weight loss program. And then your family came into town and you went completely off the rails. Right. And so this is absolutely everything. And so working on this comeback rate, because let's face it, what do we, most people do, or what have we done in the past? I know I have, is the moment what I call a valley, which is a challenge, comes into our lives, it's very easy to just quit and forget about the part of ourselves that set the goal in the first place or was inspired in the first place. And so anything that we can do to get back to that place, and minimize the comeback rate, that's the gold right there.
And so how have you increased your comeback rate?
Absolutely. It's about having your toolkit. You know, there's so many different tools, there's so many different habits, and I think it's fantastic to try and experiment, but ultimately you got to find your set of tools and using your intuition. When do you need which at what time that are going to help you come back into that state? So for example, for me, physical fitness is absolutely massive. As you know, in terms of my comeback rate, it's not even about how I look. It's about my emotional work. But things like physical fitness, things like meditation, things like listening to a podcast like this, all of those things help get my mind back in a powerful state. And so have a list of tools, experiment, and then your go-tos, just use those when the time calls for it. You know, often we know of powerful habits. It's a funny thing. We'll use powerful habits when things are going well. And the moment that we experience a challenge, we just throw them away. And it's like, no. The challenge is actually when you need to lean on those habits and lean on those tools more than ever.
I love that. It's so true. It is so true. And I love that you have all these, I really see the philosopher in you, where you have these, like the comeback rate and I love that you have, what's the word? Like these principles that you truly live by and teach and embody. And I actually want to go in an interesting direction with the comeback rate. And you're someone that when I think of the divine masculine, of presence, of just showing up, from what I've seen of you online, obviously. And there's also the emotional component of, when we do have disappointment, we still feel those emotions. And for the men that are listening, who do experience the emotion, but also want to have the comeback rate and those tools, how would you guide men and women, but especially men, because I think there's a transformation happening there with how men deal with emotions and showing up even more powerfully. How do you process emotions as a man, but also in a way that's productive and increases your comeback rate?
I love that. Well, the key to remember is almost like unprocessed, unexamined thoughts, unprocessed, unexamined emotions. Thoughts will steer the ship, but the emotions, they'll take you in all types of directions. And so the first step is actually what you said, is to actually process the emotion, which sounds so simple because you just said it, but most of us don't do that. I know I was never trained to do that. I didn't have a male figure, but even female figures in my life that really showed me how to really process emotions. And so I, like many people, grew up thinking being sad, being hurt, feeling weak, feeling less than, that's very, very weak. And you do not, first of all, you don't show that, of course, but even when you feel it, do anything you can to get away from it. So for me, I don't believe you can build a powerful relationship with yourself that's conditional. We talk about unconditional love with other people, but I know for a long time I had a conditional relationship with myself, and it went something like this: if I achieve, if I show up powerfully, if I am always in a really nice, presentable state to the world, then I'll really appreciate myself. But the moment I don't, then that's going to feel really uncomfortable. And so it's all about the moment that you allow that emotion to pass. There's always clarity on the other side. Like let's face it. Think about the last time you cried and you were going through something and you just let it out, or let out the emotions in some other way. There's always clarity on the other side of that. At the minimum, you're going to feel better. So my process is really simple. It's about identifying it, right? And so, okay, I feel sad. Great. That's it. We don't have to add all this mental, rambling explanations or stories about it. I feel sad. Okay. And then two, it's allowing that sadness to pass. And then once it passes, it's okay. Now I have even just 5% more clarity, 10%, 30% more clarity. What can I do with this clarity that I have now? What is something I can do in the world to actually do something with this clarity? And I'll tell you, Celine, the more that I've kind of evolved in my own personal growth, the more emotions I allow myself to feel on a very deep level. So for example, during the pandemic season, so I go on these hikes in Arizona. All the gyms were closed. So I was hiking literally every day. And during that season, I had probably a string of 3 or 4 weeks where every day was just tears were coming down my face.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't, I never once thought something's wrong. This is bad. Actually, I saw it as a sign of maturity. I saw it as a sign of growth. And I got massive clarity by just staying open and curious. And I think curiosity towards our own emotions is everything. Instead of just labeling or trying to find the answer immediately, it's like, why am I feeling this way? And doing that from a compassionate angle. So it's a long answer, but my definition of success is feeling alive. That's my definition, just feeling alive. I had a much wordier one before, but now it's just feeling alive. Now, part of feeling alive is to experience deep joy, powerful presence, states of just, bliss, gratitude. And then, but also part of feeling alive is allowing yourself to feel sadness at times, allowing yourself to feel vulnerable, allowing yourself to feel all of these things. And at both ends of the spectrum, you feel alive. And the more that you can allow the emotions that people call negative, I'm doing that with air quotes because I don't like using those terms because emotions are not negative. The more that you can allow those, the more likely that you can allow these.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. As I always say that, and I feel that it's like, if we don't allow the sorrow or those deep emotions, and on the flip side, the polarity, we won't also experience. Yeah.
No way. You'll live in this really comfortable, well, depends how you say it, but this middle place where, and I forget where I got this, but let's say your emotions are on a 1 to 10. And again, it's not about the value of them, but let's say 1 is like tremendous sadness and 10 is like unabashed joy. Let's face it, I know for me, I'll speak in my own experience. When I was living a life that I considered out of alignment, I was like in between like a 4 and a 6. I wasn't letting myself get to a 1 because I would, kind of run away from that through alcohol or sports or whatever. But I certainly wasn't getting to the other side of that.
Totally.
I was going out and doing all these things. And so I was stuck in this very emotionally flat place. If my team won on Sunday, then Celine, I'd be a little more pumped up when I went to work on Monday. And if, I had an issue in a relationship, then I'd be a little worse off. But that's not a place where you're going to feel alive. And so I love that you mentioned that because, and it's so important for people to hear, because to think that something is wrong with you, or you're doing something wrong, or you're not capable, or maybe you launched something that you thought was perfect for you, and now it's giving you some type of uncertainty or sadness, et cetera, to judge yourself for that, that will kill your comeback rate. You'll never come back from that. You'll quit.
It's so true. And I found that, for example, will increase my own comeback rate, was what you're saying, because before it was all good stuff that, whether it went from bad habits to quote unquote good stuff. Like if I felt anxious or something, I'm like, oh, just go do yoga, just go for it. But those are great as tools once I've processed. But I don't think a lot of us have seen healthy emotional regulation, as you were pointing to. And so we're really stepping forward and saying, actually, emotions are not just there for a reason. We don't need to dwell in them, but they're also, like you said, being curious about that.
Yeah. And one quick note on that, because I got the chance to connect with probably the most expert person on this, who told me, a Harvard psychologist. She said emotions, from a scientific background, only last 90 seconds in our circuitry. the rest of that is the rumination. So it's basically us choosing the emotion over and over again. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, because talk about comeback rate. It's like, how many of us have been in patterns where we're just repeating the same emotion and repeating the same thing over and over and over again. So that's not to say it's always going to take 90 seconds, but you can shift yourself out of a state once you've processed it. The key is processing. The moment you process it, then you can very quickly shift to a new state.
You know, it's funny because that reminds me of Dr. Joe Dispenza. You know, we talked about like the addiction of being in the emotion, because we can become addicted to it if we don't shift the story that's going on.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is so funny because this happened just this morning with my relationship where Eric he wanted to share something with me that he thought I would be upset about, but it was more of his emotions, and I was so open and I wanted to hear. And he was at the gym. He's like, oh, do I tell her? Do I not? Because again, it's like the masculine expressing emotion. And he's like, oh my God, you're so receptive, this. And, you know, and I would love to know from your perspective too, because you just married the love of your life. And for anyone listening, Taylor's podcast is the Higher Self podcast as well. But Tommy, what would you advise to the men who maybe they're disappointed or hurt by something that their partner did or didn't do? How would you advise for men to really to speak to their partner, and what would the hope be from their partner to, like, as a way to receive their emotion or their feedback?
Yeah, and this is such an important practice for enduring, sustainable, extremely healthy, relationships. And so, for me, one of the first steps is to just be able to have the courage and be vulnerable enough to say, and obviously you have to create the space. You know, if somebody's rushing to do something, that's not the time to do it. So you got to be very, just use discernment with the time and space, and set the expectation, et cetera, et cetera. But once you do, and that's pretty simple. Then for me, it's like, here's being able to just identify the emotion. Here's how I'm feeling. Right. And that's such a simple statement, but it opens up the lens of empathy for somebody else to be able to be like, I had no idea that you were feeling this way. Right. And so once you start to identify it, then it becomes a conversation. And then through conversation, we build connection, and through connection, we build trust, and the cycle goes on and on and on. But if we live in a place where we're like, I don't know if I'm going to share that, or I'm going to hold that in, they're never going to have any idea often that we're feeling that way. I mean, they're going to feel it, but they won't know exactly.
Yes.
And so if you want a flourishing relationship, it has to be it's a two-way street of creating the containers and creating the spaces where you can have these conversations. By the way, this does not have to be a 3.5 hour therapy session where, it can be that's the important thing. And as an example, we've all had a conversation that we had to have with someone today, and just tell them something about how we're feeling, or the way they said something made us feel a certain way. And today it's like a level 2 in terms of, of how intense it is for us, or the consequences. But we don't have the conversation today. And then 3 months from now, the pattern starts to repeat itself. And now it's like a level 6. We still don't have the conversation until we have this huge blow up, and we ruin the trip that we were taking to the lake because we had held it in for so many months, and it finally came out when we were both exhausted and both hungry. And now we're in this place. So don't put it off. Just do it now while it's a very small thing. And then the pattern won't repeat itself, because like anything in our lives, if that goes unaddressed, it's just going to repeat itself, and the stakes are going to get higher and higher. It's
so true. You said about when it's still small, and it's not too small to share that. And I'm such a proponent of healthy, beautiful relationships and families. And so that's why I also want to bring that up is being the example. And I always aim to, on the inside, outside, embody that healthy relationships, and really those key emotional regulation, those tools of communication. And like you said, when it's small, it doesn't, like even Eric was saying, he's like, oh, I didn't know if it was too small. I'm like, No, like anything. It's like if this person in my life is feeling they want to express something, like here's the space, and that opens, like you said,
Exactly.
for trust, and that's when the relationship flourishes. So speaking about the relationships, your next book is really about the balance between being and doing, which is something that I am always exploring, because I think because I come from the personal development space, more of the also spiritual space, and there's a lot of
Sure.
being. I lived in Vancouver, whereas very much about that. But then there is this huge disconnect. There is also that can come with that space, a lack of accountability and discipline and commitment. And so, what is your next book about? Tell us.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's called it's called Hustlers and Seekers, and it's about addressing both parts of ourselves. So a life well lived, as I've defined it. Now there's many definitions, but this is also on 15 years of deep philosophy and deep examination, also talking to some of the world's greats. A life well lived to me happens at the intersection of making progress in things that are important to us. And you can call that achievement, progress, results, dreams, et cetera, et cetera. And then also building that inner peace and that inner fulfillment. So let's just call it achievement and fulfillment. Achievement being to create the things in our life that light us up, that we want to create, that are exciting for us on our terms. And we all have to define that. But here's the problem on both ends is that some of us tend hard onto the achievement and onto the ambition, which means that often we can go down a path that one, we may have not even wanted, or two, be on this path where we're buying into this belief that one day when I achieve this, then I'll have the peace and clarity that I've been looking for. So that's really the hustler's model of achievement. And then the seeker's model of fulfillment is that everything we will ever need in our lives is inside. Now, while I fundamentally agree with part of that, it can have very devastating consequences in the form of avoidance, in the form of bypassing, in the form of never sharing some of the gifts that we've worked so hard to create through the seeking world. And so I created the book because I would literally go to the bookstore, and half of the books on the business and personal development would be about how you need to 10x your dreams, about how you need to set more deadlines, about how, you're playing small. And then the other side said, you got to detach, you got to let go, you got to surrender. The universe has your back. And so I wanted to create something that blended both of these two worlds. And the end result is not balance. It's actually a synergy, because when we can balance our doing and our being, it becomes a beautiful feedback loop. And it becomes a cycle, a synergistic cycle. And let me explain what that means, because it sounds like pretty language. All that means is that you're able to use your being, and however we define that, but let's say your being toolkit, to go create something awesome that you want, or to put yourself out there or advance your career. And then you can use that energy and put it right back into your being. And so it becomes this beautiful cycle that goes back and forth.
Wow. I am so excited to get a copy. And I know that pre-orders are available now with over $600 of bonuses. Tommy, where can people get this copy of your book?
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been working on it for about 2.5 years, and it's so exciting to share it with people. So we have a page at Hustlers and Seekers. You type that out, URL, and like you said, if you pre-order it, there's you're going to get instant chapter. You're going to get one of my courses. You're going to be invited to the virtual book launch and a Q&A with me. So check that out. That's at hustlersandseekers.com.
Beautiful. I will have that linked as well. And it's amazing because this is really, like you said, fusing the world of the spirituality, the being, the feminine, and then the masculine, the achievement, the accomplishment. So it really applies for all of us, because we tend to be on one side or the other. And this is really the embodiment of both. So it's hustlersandseekers.com. And really, I would love to know if someone listening to this, Tommy, and they're really curious about what you are sharing, what you're teaching, and they are in a place where maybe they're working in a job they don't quite love, or maybe they're not quite healthy happy with their health. What advice would you tell them, and what step would you take after listening to this episode?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, so we think transformation is about these mountaintop moments or these big declarations or walking in a fire at an event. By the way, those can all be great. And I events and mentorship has changed my life, but those are just a vehicle to get to another place. And actually the first step to transformation, and the reason those events don't mention this is because the first step to transformation isn't that sexy. Yet it's the most powerful. And that's just going back to our emotions, et cetera, et cetera. It's going back and saying it's having the courage, like we've talked about, to say, here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm at physically. Here's where I'm at in my relationship. Here's where I'm at with all of these different markers of life, but not infuse all of these stories and judgments and narratives. But just being able to look, I call it staring nakedly at ourselves. Because once we know where we are, then there's a degree of responsibility and there's a degree of ownership. And when we have responsibility and ownership, now we can set sail on a path. So if somebody was listening to this, I would say to write down for one area, pick one area that you're really focused on. That's maybe you're in a season that you're working on, whether that's your weight, your business, your career, et cetera, et cetera. And just start with identifying exactly where you are in that place. And then literally break it down to the smallest possible step that you can take today. And I say that so often and it sounds so simple, but progress is what's going to motivate us. Just even a little bit of progress on a daily basis, it adds up and it adds up and it adds up and it adds up. And you wake up 6 months later and you're like, whoa, I had no idea I'd be in this place. But it all started with, here's where I'm at, and here's a first step that I could take.
Beautiful. It is simple. Not everyone will do it, but those who will do it are the ones who have the results. It really is. It really
Exactly.
is. We didn't talk a whole lot about ownership. That is one of the most important things I will credit to everything that I have been able to accomplish. And anyone that I speak to that is at a high level, you hear it in their language, this self-ownership. And yes. One of the other things too, is I see a row of books behind you as well, is you surround yourself with the people who think in this way. Your podcast, you have had some incredible guests on your show. And this is why I believe that people need to be a part of your circle, really, to elevate to their next level. So Tommy, first of all, how do you help people? And then where can people find you?
100%. Yeah. So I help people get some of the steps that we talked about. I help them just get a level of clarity of, here's where I'm at. I open them up to where they could possibly go. But then we go all the way back and we say, what can we actually do today? And what can we do for the next 90 days and 6 months to start closing that gap? But I love what you said there before I talk about Resist Average real quick, is that don't even try to do this alone. Like, and I'm not saying like, I'm saying like, you need to have a community of people. You need to have books. You need to have someone in your ear in the morning when you're not where you want to be in your life and you're in your morning workout. All of those things, mentors, coaches, guidance comes from all different sources. I consider Thoreau and Emerson as much mentors of mine as Dr. John DeMartini, who I worked with hand in hand for years. Yes. But I just wanted to emphasize that because you need all of that support. You need the hands-on support, like in the trenches, and you need people from afar, and you need strangers to come into your life, et cetera, et cetera. So on that, but yes, the Academy, Resist Average Academy podcast, and we have conversations like this where we, my obsession is, uncovering the path to not just achievement, but fulfillment at the same time. Can you love the process of bringing a goal or desire to life as much as the outcome, right? Like don't wait to do that. And that's what I help people do, because I needed to figure that out for myself. And it all starts with self-preservation, and then we teach, and then we teach others. But I love what you said, books, podcasts, resources, and things that resonate, right? Like I know for me, like when I'm in my car or on my runs and I'm listening to a podcast, there might be a 15-second clip.
Yeah.
And you do the whole, you press the button and it goes back 15 seconds and then you play it again. Capture that with everything you've got. Like find a way to tattoo it into your mind, body, and spirit, because it's resonating, because it's speaking truth into the deepest part of who you are. And so I'm crazy with this, Celine. Like I'll pull over on the side of the road. Like I'll stop anything I'm doing and I'll capture it and I'll write it down and I'll screenshot it. And then I'll go listen to it hundreds of times. So anyways, that's just an extra thing because an insight. So insight, and then we have inspiration. They both, an insight that doesn't get acknowledged never turns into something that's real inspiration. And inspiration in spirit, inside, it's connecting with the deeper part of us. So do not lose that, because that can be the transformation that you needed. I'm sure your amazing story. Maybe the first time you listened to my podcast, there was one thing that was like, yes, this, and then you pulled on that string and you pulled on the next string and you pulled on it, and then look at all the things that you've created. So thanks so much for that.
Oof. That was juicy. That's like a minute rewind thing of its own. I love
rewind while I'm talking about rewind. That would be amazing.
Exactly. Exactly. I love it. I love the Into the Wild poster. That's a teacher actually. Happiness is only real when shared. So thank you for sharing who you are. Thank you so much for your generosity. I will
100%.
link to your book, your podcast, your website. And really, I encourage you to reach out to Tommy on Instagram, follow him, and get his new book, hustlersandseekers.com. Tommy.
Celine, just want to say thank you, and amazing everything that you've created, and the courage that you've shown, and it's inspiring to everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. See you next time.